Okay, today we're going to do part 4 in our series about these 10 animals in the Torah. And today we're going to do the last 3 of the animals. That's in the second pasuk, Dishon, Soy, and Zamer. So we'll start with Dishon, of course. And in order to see how the Rishonim translate this word, I'm going to start with a question that seems to be totally unrelated. And that is like this. There's a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, and it says that you could use any animal's horns for a shofar for Rosh Hashanah, except for a cow's horns, because that horn is called a karen in the pasuk. The pasuk says b'chor shor hadar loy v'karnei re'em karnav. So the shor's horn is called a karen it's called a karen. And secondly, is that it's never referred to as a shofar. So this is not, you can't use it as a shofar because it's a karen and it is not a shofar. Okay, fine. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. So Tosfos over there asks, he says, a question. He says, okay, the Torah, the pasuk has 2 animals in it. It has a shor and a re'em. It says, b'chor shor hadar loy v'karnei re'em karnav. So why does the Mishnah only say you can't use a shor's horn? Why doesn't it say that you can't use a re'em's horn also? So Tosfos says that maybe the horns of a re'em are not hollow. So of course it couldn't be used as a shofar, because we've seen in the previous one, maybe it was the first time, in the first part of the series, we said that if it's a kind of a horn that can't be hollowed out, of course in English that doesn't make sense. A horn could always be hollowed out, but something on the head that can't be hollowed out, then you can't use it as a shofar anyhow. So the Mishnah didn't have to bother saying that it's possible because it's a karen instead of a shofar. Okay, that's what Tosfos says. So that's why the Mishnah didn't have to say it. Now, the way Tosfos talks about it makes it sound like Tosfos didn't really know what a re'em was. He was just guessing. He was just saying maybe they have horns that are solid. Okay, but the Ramban says it more definitively, at least in one of his answers. He says a re'em has a solid horn, and therefore it can't be used as a shofar, and that's why the Mishnah didn't say it. There's no reason for the Mishnah to say it, because it's not something that's even in the running to be used as a shofar. Now, we talked about it in the very first time, that the word, in English, the word horn is the word we use to describe the things on animals' heads, for lack of a better way of saying this, that are hollow. Okay, and if they're solid, then we call them antlers or ossicones. Okay, but horn is one we use for hollows. So now we also saw that there are not too many animals that actually have antlers and ossicones. So when the Ramban is telling us that that the re'em has a solid horn, a solid thing on its head, that means is that we don't have that. It cuts down our choices of what could be the re'em, because it's only one that has antlers or ossicones. Now, when we talked about it then, we said, wait a second. It might be that a tusk or a fangs, were coming out of the mouth, or the rhinoceros's horn, which comes out of its snout, might also be within the range of what the Torah would call a karen or a shofar, one of those kind of things, even though it doesn't come out of the top of the head like other ones do. And all of those are solid. Tusks, fangs, and rhinoceros horns are all solid. So maybe that means it opens up the possibility that maybe the rhinoceros or another animal with tusks or fangs is the re'em. Okay, we could be hanging now. And so we could broaden our possibilities of what a re'em is. It might be more than just something with an antler or ossicones. Maybe it's one of these other kind of animals. Now let's move further with this. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Zachem describes a re'em as being this huge, ridiculously huge animals. And the Ben Yehoyada says, okay, it's an exaggeration. Okay, it's part of the Rabbi Bar Chana story, so it's an exaggeration. But obviously, it means something big. You don't make an exaggeration. You don't call something a mouse when you don't use a mouse as your example of this thing that's huge. Okay, so it must be something really huge. And also in Yardei, the Darkei Moshe says from Hagoyis Mayuni that the real re'em is really very large. He says it's gadol hu ma'od, not just a regular animal. The Rama over there is saying it's not what we colloquially call the re'em. It means something really even bigger than that. Okay, so it's a really big animal. And Tosfos over there in Tzvachim says that animal that the Gemara in Tzvachim was talking about is what the pasuk by us refers to as a Dishon. And he says, remember that's where we started from. We're trying to find what a Dishon is. And he says, and a riot to that is because you look at the Targum, it says Dishon, the Targum for that is Rima, okay, which is, he's saying is the same thing as Re'em. Okay, so now let's put a bunch of things together here now. So if it is true that the Dishon means Re'em, that means Dishon must be a kosher animal. That means tells us that the Dishon is a large kosher animal, with what the Ramban told us that it has a solid horn, then it has a solid horn also. Okay, we're putting all these pieces together. It's large. The Gemara Zvachim says it's really large. Taisa says it's Dishon, it must be a kosher animal, and the Ramban said that it has a solid horn. So we put all these pieces together. That means it's obviously not rhinoceros, elephant, walrus, or warthog. Those are all non-kosher animals. It's not a musk deer or a chevrotain, because those are kosher animals and they have antlers, but they're not very large at all. Okay, so it doesn't leave us many choices of what this animal could be. It could be it's a giraffe or an okapi. Those are and certain deer-like animals that have antlers. Okay, that could be. That's possible. It's one of those. Now we saw also that ayal and yachmor are different kinds of deer. Remember we talked about different kinds of what deer they are, and maybe re'im or dishon is another type of deer that's particularly large, maybe like a moose. Maybe it's a third kind of a deer type animal. Okay, maybe it could be, because we're going to see later today that most assume that a Zamer is a giraffe, but maybe he holds differently. Maybe he holds a Dishon as a giraffe. Okay, but none of these is great. Again, our choices here either to say is he holds it as a Zamer, it's a giraffe, and Zamer means something else, something mysterious that we don't know what it is, or we're going to say is that Re'im now means all of a sudden a third kind of deer-like animal, let's say like a moose, a really large one. Okay, but it's not the greatest answer for us to say these things. But we're left hanging because they're talking about what this Re'im is, and potentially then that the Dishon is this Re'im, but they're giving us a lot of clues about what we should be looking for, but not giving us a specific definition, and not leaving us with such great choice of what it could be. Now that's all in one, so to speak, one world of what it might be. That sees Dishon as being Re'im. But Reb Saadia says that Dishon he translates as a word, Aleph, Reish, Vav, Yud, and in Rabbi Ari Kaplan says that word means the chamois. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which I'm going to talk about in a minute what it is. Okay, but for now, just that animal. And the Chizkuni also says that it means that animal. Again, chamois. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So that's our first thing that tells us that Reb Saadia didn't agree with this Tosfos, because the chamois animal, it's kosher, but it's a very small animal, okay? And it has standard hollow horns. It doesn't have antlers, okay? So it's not large and doesn't have solid horns. So it's not what we've been talking about until now. He's definitely not agreeing to whatever we said beforehand. Now, I said beforehand that that there is, the Torah calls an animal a re'im. It says v'karnei re'im karnov. I mentioned that. Also, there's another pasuk when it's talking about Bilam, and Bilam says kisoyafos re'im loy. Okay, and when Saadia going on that, when he in his pirush on the Chumash, when he translates that, Rabbi Kapach noted it like this: there are 8 times, Rabbi Kapach says 8 times in Tanakh where Rav Saadia going translates the word re'im as rim, which is an Arabic word, which means addax. Addax, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is a white antelope. Okay, we'll talk in a minute what it looks like. But that's what he says in 8 of the places. But in the pasuk of Karnei Rim Karnov, in Karnei Rim Karnov, which is the pasuk we've been talking about, he says it means, I'm not even going to try to say the word in Arabic, it's rhinoceros. Okay, a word that means a rhinoceros. Okay, so so if Re'im means rhinoceros, it's none of those choices of Re'im, either rhinoceros or addax, is chamois. And Rav Saadia is obviously not agreeing with what Taisa says that Dishon means Re'im. Because for Re'im, Rav Saadia says it either means rhinoceros or it means addax. And for Dishon, he says it means addax. So it's obviously not the same kind of things. Okay. Now, I'll just, before we move on for a second, Rabbi Kapach wonders, how could the word Re'im mean addax and rhinoceros? Like, how could it be 2 different things? So he says, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not such a strange question. He says the Torah has, within a few psukim of each other in Vayikra, it uses the word tinchemes to mean a certain bird, and also to be the sheretz. Okay, so he says, well, maybe Re'im is like that also. Maybe one word can mean 2 totally different things. And he points out that in Daniel, Re'im means something else. So maybe for this it's easier to say that in the Torah the word Re'im means one thing, and in Nach it means it means addax. In Torah it means rhinoceros. Okay, anyhow, let's go on. So getting back to Tosfos' question, why didn't the Mishnah say Re'im? Why did the Mishnah tell us that you can't blow shofar from a cow's horn? Why didn't it tell us you can't blow from a Re'im's horn? So the answer for in Reb Saadia Gaon is going to be simple. He said the Karni Karna, that pasuk is talking about a rhinoceros. Okay, so you can't use rhinoceros's horn because it's not hollow and it's not a kosher animal. Okay, and we saw again in the first time we in the first part of the series that many hold that you can't use non-kosher animals to be for the mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah. So there's two reasons why you can't use it. So according to Reb Saadia Gaon, it's obvious why the Mishnah didn't tell us that a re'im can't be used for Rosh Hashanah, because of course it can't be, because it's a solid horn and because it's from a non-kosher animal. So we're good, no problem. Okay. Okay. Now there's a little bit of a question. It actually is a question. The Rashi says from a Sifri that Bechar Shar Hadalai and Karnir and Karnav, that it's the strength of the ox's horn and the beauty of the re'im's horn. So if re'im meant an addax, that would be great, because addax has these very beautiful horns. In fact, it has very beautiful horns. Rhinoceroses don't have beautiful horns at all. So if anything, we would have thought that the rhinoceros would be the one that would get the strength, the strength, rather than the horn of a ox. Seemingly, we would have switched it around. But okay, that's a question. Anyhow, so but there's something else to think about according to Reb Saadia Gaon. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the Ramban says, the Ramban asks, why doesn't the Mishnah list re'im as an animal you can't use for a shofar? And he says, well, his question is because I have two psukim where our re'im is called a keren. One is karnei re'im karnav, that was the pasuk we've been talking about, and the other is a pasuk in Tehillim where it says, karnei re'im inisoni. Okay, and that's re'imim, I mean, is the plural of one re'im and two re'imim. Okay, so the Ramban gives two answers. The answer that he likes is the one that we said beforehand, that he thinks it's re'im has a solid horn, and that's his second answer. His first answer is, in fact, a re'im horn is not kosher for the mitzvah. It theoretically could be used, doesn't have a solid horn. The answer he likes is that it has a solid horn. He says, no, but not, the first answer he says is, well, maybe it doesn't have a solid horn. And really, it's not kosher for the mitzvah. So why didn't the Mishnah say it? Because it was so uncommon, it's so unusual, this is such a not common animal, the Mishnah doesn't have to tell you not to use that. It told you not to use a cow's horn, because cows are all over the place. So it had to tell you not to use that, because that's a relevant piece of information. But to tell you that you shouldn't use a re'im's horn, no one's going to plan to use that anyhow. Now, the pasuk in Tehillim that I mentioned, from which Ramban is in Kashrus, one of them is, that pasuk is one of the places where Saadia Gaon says re'im means addax. Okay, addax. Okay, it's a kosher animal. It has hollow horns, and excuse me. And Reb Saadia Gaon says we wouldn't list it in the Mishnah. Reb Saadia Gaon said we we didn't list re'im. We had said, according to Reb Saadia Gaon, it wouldn't list rhinoceros because it's solid and because it's not kosher. Well, neither of those reasons apply to an addax. Okay, an addax is not solid. Its horns are not solid, and it is kosher. So, according to Reb Saadia Gaon, why didn't, and according to Ramban's first answer, why did the reason why the Torah didn't mention it is because it's just a very uncommon animal. It's not the animals you have all around. Mishnah didn't have to bother to tell you not to use it because no one's going to use it anyhow. But it means is that according to Reb Saadia Gaon, the addax horn can't be used as a shofar because it's a keren. Everybody knows that the Mishnah says you can't use a cow's horn because it's a keren. Well, an addax horn is also a keren. Again, Reb Saadia Gaon says that the pasuk that calls re'im in Tehillim is talking about an addax, and if it's talking about addax, then that animal's horn is referred to as a keren and not as a shofar, and it cannot be used for the mitzvah. Okay, why didn't the Mishnah say it? Easy. Why the Mishnah say it? Like the Ramban says, because it's such an unusual animal, people don't have them in their backyards. Don't have to worry about that. Well, that's fine, and that's I think it's correct according to Reb Saadia Gaon. But the question is for us is, how broad is that breed that we call re'im? Re'im, if re'im means addax, how broad is that breed? The most distinct, I mean, at least to me, feature about an addax is its large twisted horns. Okay, well, there are several other animals that are of similar size that also have twisted horns, and the question is, should they also seemingly they would also be included into the same min as addax? For example, Kudu, which has very similar horns, but it's a little more twisted than the addax's horns, or the oryx, otherwise known as the gemsbach, which has similar horns, but they're very perfectly straight. They're like long, with a little bit bend of it, but basically straight. or the eland. These animals also look very similar to addax, and their horns are also very unusual and long, with a little twist, a little more twist, a little less twist, give or take, but they're very similar, and seemingly they should be in the same min. And this is relevant because Kudu horns are the horns. I'm sure everyone listening has seen them. They look very dramatic. They have one or two curls in them that they're long, and it's somehow you get these pictures of people blowing them because they think Mashiach is coming. These big long horns, and there are actually communities that use them in Rosh Hashanah. And seemingly, according to Reb Saad Yagoin, those animals should be those kudus are part of the min of Re'im that should not be used as a shofar because they are kosher animals, but they are called a keren, not called a shofar. Okay, so I know we've stretched a little bit from our Dishon. We'll get back to it in a second. But seeing we came out with a piece of information here that these horns should not be used for Rosh Hashanah. Now, back to Dishon. I told you that Reb Yagoin and the Chizkuni say the word Dishon means a chamois. It's a small animal. It's sort of like a goat. It lives in the mountains. It doesn't get taller than about 30 inches, so it's a small animal. It has this little tiny tail that you could barely see. It has these tiny little cute horns, which are pretty straight, and they hook a little bit backwards in at the end of them. If you remember, I mentioned that Taisa says maybe that's what Gemara meant about mifutzalas. Now, for many of the chayas that are listed in the Torah, the most obvious feature that they have is their horns and their antlers. All the different details about them is one of their most significant features. If you think of it like that, then this chamois is the opposite of it. It's the anti-chaya. Its horns are barely noticeable. It's like this very, not anything significant. And the most obvious thing you notice about it is how tiny it is. It's this tiny little small animal. It barely has a tail. It has these little horns that don't catch your much attention. They're not noticeable. It's not like a deer or a giraffe or antelope or any kind of, or the kudus or these kind of things have these unusual horns. So it's seemingly then Dishon would include all these little animals that are very small, chayas that are very small and that have horns that are not particularly meaningful or noticeable. And that there's a whole bunch of those kind of animals. I'm going to list off a bunch of them. Chevrotain and clip springers and musk deer and oribi, maybe pronghorns, the pudu, Sa'alo, I'm not sure if I pronounced it right, and steinbug. And all of these, some of them have no horns at all. Some of them have just fangs, not horns, and they're all really small. Some of them are 20 inches and 30 inches high. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're all over, and they're found all over the world in Asia and Africa. Some of them in North America, South America, Vietnam, all kinds of places. And they're all small. So what my point is that if we will accept that what Reb Yagoin says and the Chizkuni says that the Dishon is this small animal, the chamois, the feature that we will pick out of it is to say what the min is will be its small stature. It's a chaya, but it has a small stature. It barely has a horn to it, nothing of any great significance, and it will include many other animals that are similar to that. Okay, now let's move to the second to last animal, sa'oi. And now, here again, before we explain what the animal is, first I have to mention something that the Chazal and the Poskim speak about the shor habor. The shor habor is a bar means wild, like non-domesticated, a wild ox. Okay, and then we'll see how it connects to soy. So the Mishnah has a machlokes. The Tanakama says that a shor habor is a behemoth, and Rabbi Yossi says that it's a chaya. Here's a machlokes whether this shor habor is a behemoth or a chaya. And the Gemara says, the Gemara is in Chulin. That Mishnah was in Klayim, but the Gemara is in Chulin, says that both Shitas hold that a shor habor is the sa'oi of the Torah. And you could tell that because the targum for the word sa'oi is Turbala. Turbala is a contraction for the word tor, means sharp, that means a cow, and bala means of the forest. Okay, that's how Rashi explains it. So a Turbala means basically a wild shor. So the Gemara says that everyone holds that sa'oi means Turbala, and the machlokes now is whether that pasuk is a behemoth or it's a chaya. Okay, the Tanakam holds it's a behemoth, and Rabbi Yossi holds it's a chaya. What's the machlokes dependent on? So Rabbi Yossi says that the Torah says 10 animals in two psukim. The first pasuk has 3 animals, and the second pasuk has 7. And the way they're split up sure gives the impression that the first pasuk is the three animals that are behemoths, shor, say, ksav, say, izim, and the second pasuk has the seven, which are the chayas. That's a nice, neat division of how they are, which would mean that the sa'oi, which is at the end of the second pasuk, is there for a chaya. That would be that's Rabbi Yossi holds, and Tanakama holds that since the Torah uses calls this animal Turbala, that in itself tells you that it's a behemoth because it's a kind of shor. So if it's a kind of a shor, well, we all know that a shor is a behemoth, so then a Turbala is a kind of a behemoth also. Now, there's lots to say about that. What did the Gemara mean by that? I'm not going to go into that. There's lots here if you want to read the footnote. But a lot to understand is why, because we call it, actually we should have thought just the opposite. If it had shor and a second thing called a shor, a turbala, you would think that would be, it's not a behemoth. But we're going to skip that for now, and they get just the understanding that somehow the Tanakama holds that since it's also a type of a shor, it must be a behemoth also. Now, but now we have a question. If you open the Rambam, the Rambam says like this. He says that a shor bar is a behemoth. Okay, like the Tanakama, the shor bar is behemoth. So, if I were to then ask you, well, if shor bar is behemoth, then there are four behemoths. It should be four behemoths and six chayas, because we have shor, say, ksav, say, izim. Those are the three we know, and ta'oi, because the Gemara said that shor bar is ta'oi. So if shor bar is a behemoth, then ta'oi is a behemoth. There should be four behemoths and six chayas. That's what we would think. But in the very same halacha, the Rambam says there are three behemoths and seven chayas. Okay, and the Mechaber goes like that. I'll get to the Rambam in a second. The Mechaber says like that. Also, there are three behemoths and seven chayas. Well, what does that mean? How could there be three behemoths if the Rambam paskins and Shulchan Aruch paskins that a sa'oi is a behemoth, and the Gemara says that sa'oi is, if we paskin that a shor bar is a behemoth, and we paskin, and the Gemara says that a sa'oi is a shor bar. So what's going on over here? Is a shor bar behemoth or is it a chaya? Which it can't be both. Okay, so a lot of people ask that question, and the Pri Chodesh and the Gemara give an answer. Okay, they explain like this. It's true that the Gemara says that everybody agrees that a sa'oi is a turbala. But that's only what the Bavli says. The Yerushalmi and the Tosefta say not like that. Okay, again, everything I told you until now was the way the Bavli says it. That everyone agrees that a shor bar is the sa'oi. And it's like this. When the Targum says that sa'oi is turbala, meaning that it's shor bar, that's according to Rabbi Yossi. That the Targum is holding like Rabbi Yossi that a shor bar the shor bar is a chaya. But according to Tanakama, that sa'oi is not the shor. According to Tanakama, ta'oi is not the shor habar. It's something else. We don't know what it is. It's something else. The sa'oi is not the shor habar. Not the turbala. So ta'oi is taka a chaya. According to the Yerushalmi, everybody holds that ta'oi is a chaya. The machlokes just is the shor habar a kind of a shor, in which case it's a behemoth. That's the Tanakama, or is it a chaya because it's the sa'oi? But everyone agrees that sa'oi is a chaya. So that means everyone, according to the Yerushalmi, everyone agrees that there's three behemoths and seven chayas, and that's why the Rambam says it. Everyone agrees that there's three behemoths and there's seven chayas, and the machlokes is just whether shor habar is part of sa'oi or shor habar is part of shor. We paskin in that sense. The Rambam says we paskin that shor habar is part of shor, so it's a behemoth. Okay, but that doesn't take away from there still being three behemoths and seven chayas. Okay. So it's going to come out according to this that the Rambam is passing like the Yerushalmi over the Bavli. Okay, and the Gemara says that sometimes the Bavli does it. The Gemara Aurochs says that sometimes if he thinks that the Yerushalmi seems more straightforward, etc., then he'll find it. He'll pass like the Yerushalmi, and according to this, that's what he would be doing, passing like the Yerushalmi rather than like the Bavli. Okay, so one thing we saw was that according to the Bavli, everyone agrees that the sa'oi is the shor habar. And according to the Tosefta, the Yerushalmi, and the Rambam, there's a machlokes what a sa'oi is. Okay, so that means that just prepares us to realize that there's going to be different explanations for what this word sa'oi means. Okay, like for one is the Targum said it means shor habar. Okay, but the Rambam says no, but that's following a sheet like that we don't hold like. The Rambam says like this. The Rambam says this is in Siman Chavches in Yodea. Says that since some people say that shor habar is a chaya, and there's a Mechaber says shor habar is a behemoth, but the Rama says, some people hold that shor habor is a chaya, like the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. So you should be machmir for that shita and do kisi adam if you shecht one. You only do kisi adam on chayas, not on behemoths, and therefore we should be machmir to treat it like a chaya also. And we'll talk about that next time. Mitzvah Hashem, the difference between a behemoth and a chaya. He also says that the shor habor, the sa'oi, the shor habor, which is the sa'oi, is the European buffalo. What he just calls the buffalo, but we would refer to as the European buffalo. That's its own question, but the Rama says like that. I'm going to just keep on going, and that's pretty reasonable. Okay, it's non-domesticated animal. It looks somewhat similar to a cow, so it wouldn't be strange for us to think it's a reasonable choice to say is that the buffalo, the European buffalo, is the shor habor, is the sa'oi, is this wild cow, the non-domesticated cow, because it's reasonably like it. It's a big animal, but it's similar to a cow. Now, others suggest is that the real shor habor, the original, so to speak, shor habor, is the aurochs, which is an even larger animal. It was a non-domesticated animal that was like a cow. It became extinct in 1627. There's actually a drawing of one made in the 1556. So when they were near becoming extinct, and it's this huge, absolutely huge animal. It's, according to the descriptions, the skeleton that they found of it, it was 6 feet tall at the shoulder. So it was this huge cow-like looking animal, ox-like looking animal that was very large. It was not domesticated at all. And European buffalo may actually be scientifically related to it also. Okay, so that's reasonable to say that according to, if sa'oi means shor habor, then it could well be that it was, the Rama says it means European buffalo, and it could be it's originally, or connected to it, is this aurochs, which is this very, very, very large looking cow-like animal. Now, according to the Rambam Shulchan Aruch, sa'oi is not the shor habor. That's what we've been saying. So what animal is it? So Rav Saadia Gaon says sa'oi is oryx, Oryx, not aurochs. The animal before I said was Aurochs. This is oryx, a very beautiful animal. The oryx. Now, again, back to here. Rav Saadia Gaon says it's the oryx, which is this very beautiful animal with very tall horns. The Arabian ones are very straight, and the scimitar oryx are a little bit bent, but they're big animals with these very big, beautiful horns, long, beautiful horns. And just interesting to note that the Septuagint translates the word sa'oi with a word, whatever the word. I'm not even going to try. I wouldn't try to pronounce it in Greek, but Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan says it's a little bit vague what that word means. And he says there are two choices what it could mean. It could either mean the aurochs or the oryx. Okay, so go figure. Here we have a machlokes, two shittas in the Mishnah, according to Yerushalmi in the Mishnah, of what it means. Does sa'oi mean aurochs or does it mean oryx? According to Rabbi Yossi, how would he translate that word? And Ken Zayin, it turns out, might even be a machlokes in what it says, two readings of what it says in the Septuagint. Go figure. Okay. Let's go on. Our last animal, the Zamer, the Septuagint, and Rav Saadia Gaon both say that it means a giraffe. In the Septuagint, it says it's called a camel pard, which is in some languages we call giraffe, because it looks somewhat like a camel and it looks somewhat like a leopard. I think that's where it comes from. And in Rav Saadia Gaon calls it a zarafa, from which the English word is giraffe comes from. Okay, anyhow, so that's what they say it means like that. Now, in 1901, people discovered this very shy animal that lives in the jungles of the Congo that no one had seen beforehand, or no one in recorded history had seen beforehand, called the okapi, which seems to be a kosher animal. Now, it has some features that seem similar to giraffes. It has tall legs, it has a very long tongues, it has ears that point upwards, and it has ossicones. Okay, so, and the only other animal with ossicones and tall legs also is a giraffe. So science classified okapis as part of the giraffe family. Now, that's fine from a scientific perspective. But if you think about it, okapis are missing two of the most prominent and obvious features. When you look at a giraffe, the first thing that you notice is not the ossicones. Okay, there are two features about giraffes that are very striking that okapis don't have. One is giraffes have these really long necks, and the other one is that the color and the patches on their skin is also very distinct. Now, the skin of the okapi don't have that. Now, they have tall legs, but they don't have the tall neck like a giraffe does. The skin of an okapi is also unusual. It's dark brown, almost like black, and has this horizontal zebra-like stripes on parts of its legs and its backside. So if you looked at an okapi, it's really unusual looking. And if you look at it, you would never think that this is a short giraffe. That would not occur to most people. That's what it is. And the truth is, it doesn't look like any other kosher animal. It looks really unusual and unique. If we have the choice, we're going to have to say it's going to be part of the Zamer giraffe category. It's the best choice. It's the closest that it has to anything else. And keeping in mind that a lot of kosher animals we've seen have been classified, like the eye on the chamois, maybe others, by the unusual shape of their horns. So maybe that's so distinct that giraffes have ossicones, which are not like horns and not like antlers, that in itself is an unusual feature to make them look the same. But it's a little bit of a question. Again, for lack of better choice, we're going to have to say that okapi are considered part of giraffe, but by no means is that a simple thing to say. And of course, as Zamer, our last animal is a chayo. Now, this is the end of our 10 animals, but we still have one more part to do in this series. That is to talk about some of the features about behemoths and chayas, the differences between them, halachic differences and other things like that. That will be in our last installment.